He had no home, no family, no future. At least, that's what the world told him. But within 24 hours, the man everyone ignored would become the one person the entire city couldn't stop talking about. On a cold, December morning in downtown Denver, Matthew Ross sat on a cracked sidewalk, his back pressed against the brick wall of a closed diner. His fingers were numb, his jacket torn, and the cardboard sign in front of him read, "Just need a chance." People walked by. Some glanced at him, most didn't. He'd been invisible for 3 years since losing his job, his home, and his marriage all in the same month. Every day felt the same until this one. As the morning traffic roared past, Matthew noticed smoke curling up from the corner of 14th and Main. At first he thought it was just another dumpster fire, but then, through the haze, he saw movement, a small figure in the window of the second floor of an old apartment building. It was a child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, pounding on the glass. Her screams were muffled by the distance, but Matthew's got twisted instantly. People on the sidewalk stopped to film with their phones, yelling for someone to call 911. Matthew didn't wait. He grabbed his blanket, threw down his sign, and ran out. By the time he reached the building's entrance, the flames had spread to the stairwell. The heat was suffocating, and the smoke burned his eyes. He hesitated for a moment. He knew one wrong move, and he'd never make it out. But the thought of that little girl alone inside pushed every fear aside. He wrapped his blanket around his face, kicked the door open, and charged in. The air inside was thick with black smoke. He could barely see 2 feet in front of him. He shouted for the girl, coughing as his lungs filled with heat. Then, faintly, he heard her cry from above. The stairs were already on fire, but Matthew didn't think. He just moved. He climbed fast, the wood creaking and cracking under his feet. Halfway up, a burning beam fell across the steps. Matthew's arm caught fire for a moment before he smothered it with the blanket. But he didn't stop. He reached the second floor, followed the sound of her sobs, and kicked open the door to a tiny apartment. There she was curled in the corner, her face streaked with soot, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. "It's okay," he told her, voice breaking. "I'm here now. We're getting out." He scooped her up, wrapped her in the blanket, and shielded her from the falling debris as they made their way back down. The fire was faster now, hungrier. By the time they reached the exit, the doorframe was collapsing. Matthew used his own body to shield her as they dove through. They stumbled into the freezing air, just as the building's windows blew out behind them. The crowd that had gathered erupted in cheers. Paramedics rushed forward, taking the girl from his arms. She was shaken but alive. The girl's mother, who had been frantically screaming outside, collapsed to her knees in tears when she saw her daughter safe. She hugged Matthew so tightly he could barely breathe. "You saved her," she sobbed. "You saved my baby." The police asked for his name. The news cameras were already there. By evening, his picture was on every local channel. "Homeless man rescues child from burning building." But the story didn't end there. The next morning, a man in a suit found Matthew sitting in the same spot outside the diner. He introduced himself as David Klein, the owner of a small construction company. "I saw you on the news," David said. "I don't know your story, but I know men like you. You've got courage, and I need people like that. How would you like a job?" Matthew stared at him, stunned. "A job, full-time, steady pay, and we'll set you up with a place to stay until you're on your feet." For the first time in years, Matthew felt something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. 6 months later, Matthew wasn't sitting on that sidewalk anymore. He had his own small apartment, a steady paycheck, and a purpose. The girl he rescued, her name was Lily, visited him every couple of weeks with her mom. They'd bring cookies, or just sit and talk. She called him Uncle Matt. At a community event later that year, Matthew was asked to speak. Standing at the podium, looking out at the crowd, he said something no one would forget. "I was homeless yesterday, and a hero today. But the truth is, I'm just a man who saw someone in need and couldn't walk away. The real heroes, they're the ones who give people like me a second chance. Because sometimes, all it takes to change a life is for someone to believe you're worth saving." The crowd stood and clapped, but Matthew's eyes were fixed on the front row where Lily sat smiling, holding her teddy bear. And in that moment, he knew he hadn't just saved her life, she had saved his too.